early on I had to explain a lot, and now I just want to experience a lot. I don't think it was a moment because it was something I've done my entire life. So there was just always art in our house. I was always surrounded by objects, art, my mother's painting, my grandfather's collection. And then it wasn't so much the idea of, oh, am I gonna become an artist? I sort of just was. And then when I was a teenager, I think I was 13, and I took classes at the San Francisco Art Institute. And there was a teacher that said, you can become an artist. And it was like, oh, okay. Then I decided I was an artist. There was a big shift when I started working with pastel. Even though these are oil paintings, I make oil paintings, but I mostly work with pastel on paper. I think around maybe 2014, 2015, the work shifted from a very flat kind of approach to much more painterly. And that was really because of my understanding of the material that evolved. So I remember there was a few marks with a couple different pieces where I really got it thick, and I was trying to think of, if I had a big brush to make this painting, what kind of mark could I do? Because I can't do that with all these little sticks. But it was like eye-opening. And I think it's really important for artists to be able to have, work and time that, they're making changes in their work. So maybe it's not the strongest thing that they do, but they're extremely important work. And now I think the concepts are much more abstract and much more about the feeling of, like, the painting itself is almost like a religious experience without the ideology behind it, without the need to explain some story, some biblical story. And I think early on I had to explain a lot. And now I just want to experience a lot. When you're viewing a painting, instead of trying so hard to get some clear explanation of it, maybe just allow it to show you what it's about. And I think that's why I bring, spirituality into the conversation a lot, because it's the closest thing we can kind of understand. It's almost like a secular version of that. You start off with some kind of concept. You start off with an idea. You have to be inspired by something. But as you work on it, there's always this point in the painting where the painting has now kind of decided to not be what you wanted it to be. And you can either fight that, or you have to go, okay, hold on, I got to step back and then almost ask, what do you want from me? And then you are there at the service of the painting. And that is something that I think every good painter experiences, that hump. And if you can get through that, you can make a great painting. If you don't get through that, you're stuck in this, boring space. Well, Gardens of Human Nature was also the title of the exhibition that I first showed it in, and then that was really the main piece of the show. On the one hand, I think painting is ultimately about trying to understand human nature. That's really the goal. Whatever a painting is about, that horrible word, or all the different kinds of artists and different kinds of painters, ultimately they're still trying to grasp human nature. It can be political, it can be formal, it can be sensual and color, all these different things, but it's about our kind of soul. I guess I should first say what sfirot are. Those are, there's 10 of them that make up, in Kabbalah, which is sort of the mystic part of Judaism. It's weird, I feel like I'm not a very religious person, but because I'm an artist, I feel like I have to be a very spiritual person, and I'm certainly a very Jewish person, but maybe more culturally and traditionally and, just who I am. But something that really excited me about sfirot is understanding them more. If you're an artist, whether you like it or not, you're going to be a pretty spiritual person because you have to feel so much. Or also if you're somebody that loves experiencing art. So you don't have to be a religious person, but it is this thing where you kind of tap into your soul every time, and you should be overwhelmed. You should feel feeling. So Sfirot, to me, have been sort of exciting to learn about because it's the most visual part of Judaism, for one, but also it doesn't really talk about a god like this one guy, but it's all these aspects really of human nature. It was a very cathartic piece. It was 2020. I live alone with my dogs, and it was the beginning of the quarantine for the pandemic. I started to think about just kind of creating this safe space for myself, which felt like a chapel. So that maybe I'll have my little, not so much a happy place, but a place where I can escape. The irony in painting is that when you're really trying to escape something, you actually really have to address it. My first response was just, wow, the level of artists that are in this collection are pretty phenomenal. To be among artists that are at such a level, or were, if they're passed away, was pretty incredible. I mean, it's rare to see that caliber all together. I was very excited to be next to a giant Joan Mitchell painting. If it isn't obvious already, I have a pretty strong connection to Monet's paintings. I spent a lot of time in France because my sister lives there for many years. And so all of the Nabi painters and the Impressionists, and those are artists. That is artwork that has taught me and informed so much of my work. But in particular, the relationship between the garden and painting and Monet's life was just so exciting. And Joan Mitchell kind of carries that as well, that tradition. One of the things I've learned in looking at all this work and just the work that I've been doing for years is very free to do whatever I want. And that I don't have to be worried about, I don't have to be worried about the, what's next. Or even where it came from. I can repeat something if I want to. I can do something completely different. The most important thing is doing something that I want to do. And just being an artist rather than thinking of where it's going. So when something's ordinary, you don't feel anything. So while I'm working, I'm often working on something and then I go, oh, it's ordinary. And that sense of failure, just, you keep going. That's not a very positive mantra, but it sure helps motivate me. It's real. I think the ordinary, art is not ordinary. Art has to be extraordinary. That's what it is.